Hello everyone, welcome to another video, and for this one I thought it'd be interesting to address a TV show. The last video I discussed a classic movie. Now I haven't really talked too much about television until relatively recently, but I did want to bring this television show up in particular because it's sort of a different genre from the last TV show that I talked about, and it's sort of within a different playing field than the previous TV show that I talked about. If you want to see the previous TV show that I talked about, it was about Gotham, which is a show that's on cable television. This in particular show is a Netflix series, so it is specifically and only on Netflix. And that particular show is titled F is for Family, as you can probably tell by the thumbnail as well as title. And F is for Family is definitely a different genre from Gotham in that it's not drama, it's comedy. And all of its glorious forms. Now, this particular show has a certain style of comedy that I really like. Now, there's some people who may not in particular like this style of comedy only because there is a lot of yelling and over-exaggeration, and I could see why that would maybe annoy some viewers. But for me personally, it doesn't really bother me too much, only because when I'm seeing the scenarios the characters kind of have to go through, I kind of identify and understand their sort of frustrations. So, F is for Family as a show focuses on the Murphy family within the 1970s, and it's also animated as well. So you have a lot of different things kind of tied into this show, and the fact that it's not traditionally a live action show like a lot of family comedies are. So it kind of follows the sort of Family Guy route in being animated. But not only that, it focuses on a completely different era, the 1970s, which they do really emphasize throughout the show. Like, you'll see how things back then were definitely a lot different than how they are now. Especially with the technology and just the way the people interacted with each other, you could really tell that it does embrace what was going on within the era. And not only is this animated, comedic, and follows the 70s route, but it also is based off of a lot of the comedian Bill Burr's childhood. Now, from what I could tell, I believe Bill Burr not only, I think, is part of producing the show, but he also stars as the main character's voice within the show. And the main character really is the dad, Frank Murphy. And I guess a lot of it is sort of inspired by Bill Burr's childhood and sort of what he went through growing up, and kind of is sort of similar to what his character, I guess, that he embodies, which is supposed to be, I guess, his dad, is very similar to the show how he was in real life. And I can sort of see that, and I really like how the show kind of tries to put in some realism there by making these characters that are inspired by real people. So what it kind of focuses on is Frank Murphy as a dad and sort of his relationship with his family. That's really the entire premise of the show. Also, the people that are within his work as well is another thing that's highly emphasized, as well as kind of his friends and people, neighbors, and other people that he knows. And what makes, I think, F is for Family stand out is how kind of crazy and over-exaggerated Frank Murphy as a character is. So you will see throughout how Frank Murphy gets rather frustrated with the scenarios he has to put up with. Not only being a dad, but having to deal with his work situation, having to deal with a lot of just other people that are outside of the family and outside of the neighborhood or even in the neighborhood. And it sort of kind of takes a toll on him at times. And you can kind of see why that is, and, why he's dealing with all of these different things that are going on kind of within his life, and how that sort of leads to a lot of comedic scenarios and situations that maybe you wouldn't expect. Um, and I think that's what makes the show so likable and entertaining, is the fact that we have this main character, Frank Murphy, who has to deal with all of this BS within his life and just sort of look back and laugh at it, sort of. And that's what I think makes the show so entertaining. It's actually unfortunately only had 2 seasons, so it's kind of in the birthing stages of really kind of developing things out. And I kind of really want to know where they sort of take the series and what ultimately ends up happening. But you can really tell that there's a lot of talented people behind the series. Um, you sort of see too the struggles that not only Frank faces, but also the different family members within his family, in particular his children, including Bill. It's kind of funny how he's playing his dad, but he's also in it as a kid. It's rather interesting in how they approach this. The wife as well, and what Frank Murphy's wife has to deal with, especially dealing with a guy like Frank, it probably is definitely not easy at times. But yeah, I can see all of these different things and how they put this all together to make something that's, I think, fairly relatable and fairly interesting and entertaining to watch. It's very over exaggerated at times, and I think a lot of that has to do with the styling of the show, because again, it is animated, it's not a live action show. So they can get away with a lot more raunchy humor. They can express that in a way that couldn't really be expressed in the same way as if they chose to do it in a live action format. And I kind of see Bill Burr's comedy as a little bit more on the exaggerated side and not necessarily on the realistic side. So I think it makes sense that he chose to go with the animation route. But again, I don't even know if that was necessarily his decision or not, but it sort of makes sense. Now, as far as a main plot of the show is concerned, it's kind of hard to really pinpoint um, the real focus of the plot, because there's a lot of different things going on and struggles that the family is going through. But a lot of the things that I think bring a lot of tension to the family and a lot of the comedy with the family is the job that Frank has to go through. His job is definitely not fun, and he has to deal with a lot of crazy people. And that is sort of what kind of, I think, ends up taking a toll on him. And you'll see how that drastically impacts the family, because you'll see how the wife maybe eventually has to go find a job as well to help support the family, and how that kind of impacts the kids, and in particular the the kids kind of on an individual level. In particular, Bill, as well as his siblings, his 2 other siblings, a little girl and a teenage boy. And I apologize that I'm not really mentioning their names, but again, they're not really the sort of main focus into what brings kind of all of the family kind of drama and and comedy. That is really Frank Murphy. Frank Murphy is really the thing that ties this whole comedy together. If it wouldn't be for Frank Murphy, there probably wouldn't be an F is for Family show. So, um, but again, you see sort of the impact that Frank has on the family, and the sort of things that he does wrong and kind of has to end up owning up to, and the things that he has to put up with, and the things that end up sort of pushing him over the edge at times. And uh, it sometimes hits home, I think, for a lot of people, because it's fairly realistic as far as maybe what a family was going through during that period. And I don't know if we're having sort of a 70s nostalgia, and maybe it's because Netflix really knows their demographics really well, so that's why a lot of their shows are taking place in like the 70s and 80s. Um, But yeah, I would definitely say that uh, this kind of approach, I think, really works not only from a comedy standpoint, but from a audience standpoint, in that Netflix really understands what audiences it's trying to appeal to. And a lot of the scenarios that they present and a lot of the ridiculousness that goes on within this series, again, it's just very entertaining and very funny. There's just a lot to laugh at. There's a lot to get out of the show, I think. And I hope once they do conclude the show, and I mean, I hope that it can last maybe at least 5 seasons, if not more. That would be fantastic, because I feel like what it's doing throughout each series is providing something new and interesting and engaging and entertaining to watch. Um, but we'll have to kind of see where they ultimately end up going with the show. Again, it's only been 2 seasons so far. I'm not entirely sure when the third one is supposed to be coming out. But at the same time, if you enjoy animation, in particular um, adult animation, you will, I think, find a lot to get out of this show. If you like family dynamic comedies, I think there's a lot to get out of this show. If you just enjoy Bill Burr's comedy and his style of writing and all that, then I think you will enjoy the show. I think it has a certain appeal to certain people, and I can understand why some people wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards it as much. But that is really my honest opinion of the show. I kind of really don't want to focus on the plot points too much, only because I don't really want to give away what exactly kind of goes on within the series, because I would rather have people enjoy the experience of it. But I will say that Frank Murphy as a character is really what carries the show, and um, is really what propels the show into having all of these comedic things happen. And at the end of the day, a lot of his struggles, a lot of his trials and tribulations end up leading to a lot of laughs and a lot of struggles at the same time, but things that you can, I think, as an audience member, relate to. Especially if you are a father, I think this is definitely something you can get a lot of fun out of. And even if you're not a dad, like, you can still kind of see the similar kinds of dynamics of family that sort of are part of maybe your family, and you can go, yeah, my dad was kind of like that. Or my dad had sort of similar struggles as well. And I think overall that's what makes the television show so entertaining. But ultimately, I think that's really all I can say about it. If there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.